Good morning. Welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefing for faith leaders. Today's program spotlights voter safety in the November elections. This event is hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the Joint Information Center of the San Francisco COVID Command Center. Some housekeeping for everyone this morning. Audio, video, and chat will be monitored and recorded for record keeping, training, and quality assurance. By default, all participants will be muted and video turned off to minimize distractions. To submit a question or comment, please select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. They will be collected and shared with the council after the meeting for response. A reminder that everyone living and working in San Francisco is eligible to get tested for COVID-19. To learn more, please call 311 or visit sf.gov/gettestedsf. Once again, welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefing for faith leaders. And I will now hand it over to the Executive Director of the SFIC, Michael Pappas.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you to our virtual outreach team for helping to make possible this important briefing that we will hear today. Good morning, I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this morning's online briefing for faith leaders. COVID-19 threatens to disrupt America's November elections, calling into question how to vote safely and the risks voters will be facing. Less than 60 days before the election, what can we do to maximize voter turnout while minimizing the health impact? This week's online briefing for faith leaders, hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the COVID Command Center's Joint Information Center virtual outreach team, welcomes San Francisco Department of Elections' John Arndts, who will answer these questions and more. Today we have a real treat. I am so blessed and privileged and honored to welcome the matriarch of Interfaith in San Francisco and the founder and past chair of the Interfaith Council, Rita Semmel, who will offer some words of welcome and read the San Francisco Interfaith Council Interfaith Statement that is read before every gathering. Rita, unmute yourself and let us be together.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. It is an honor to join you. This is a very important election, and to learn how to do it safely and properly is a real gift to all of us, for which we thank you. I'd like to read a statement that we read before every meeting. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are asked to offer a prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from a different tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other, that we may better understand the multiplicity of faith traditions in our city and in our world.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, and thank you for continuing to inspire us and for bringing and keeping us together as an interfaith community in San Francisco. Your legacy and your work is admired, and we are grateful for it. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce a friend and a colleague who will ground us in a meditative moment, Hala Hijazi, the Muslim representative on the board of directors of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, and may I add, a member of the San Francisco Human Rights Commission.
Thank you, Michael, for your leadership and your support. This is a very important meeting today. Assalamu alaikum. In the name of God, the most gracious and the most merciful, we are blessed with another day to acknowledge the oneness of our Almighty God, His love, His mercy, and His abundance of favors and blessings upon all of us. This week, as we commemorate 9/11 and look back on nearly 2 decades of lives lost and broken, almost 3,000 dead, including 343 firefighters and 72 law enforcement officers. We must honor the memory of those who perished and are still struggling by rededicating ourselves to safeguarding our religious freedom, democratic institutions, rule of law, public service, civic engagement, and charity. This year, children born on the same day as the attacks on September 11th, 2001, turned 19 years old. They are old enough to vote in this year's election, and are old enough to enlist in our armed forces. As people of faith, it is our moral, patriotic, and civic duty to exercise our constitutional right to vote and to let our voices be heard. Let's honor our brothers and sisters who were tortured and lynched, fighting for our rights to vote. And let's remember them as we fill our ballots. Today, as the pandemic is wiping out families across the United States and fires across the nation are wiping out towns, we thank our essential workers and our first responders who put out fires then and are putting them out now. Whether running into a burning house or to a COVID-19 call, they are exposed to extra challenges this year and display a special form of selfishness, compassion, and bravery. We can do no greater honor to those who are sacrificing every day than for our interfaith communities to lead the effort to work together and to create a more just and peaceful world. During these times, especially these difficult times, we are comforted by the blessed teachings of the Holy Quran and Hadiths. O mankind, I have created you from male and female and made you into tribes and nations that you may know each other, not that you may despise each other. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of God is the most righteous of you. None of you has faith until he loves for his brother or his neighbor what he loves for himself, and hates for his brother what he hates for himself. The believers in their mutual kindness, compassion, and sympathy are just like one body. When one of the limbs suffers, the whole body responds to it with wakefulness and fever. And what are some of the traits, Islamic traits, that are the best? The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Feed the people. Greet those whom you know and those whom you do not know." So thank you to the unwavering faith and hard work of our brothers and sisters in the faith-based communities who are feeding the hungry, housing the unhoused, and comforting those in need as we collectively confront circumstances that challenge our humanity and morality. Let us, all of us, pray. Almighty God, renew us in the bonds of unity and diversity. Most merciful of the merciful, increase in us the spirit of compassion and the gift of understanding, and remove from our hearts the shadow of hatred. Inshallah, God willing, our faith in God and ourselves and our nation will strengthen our resolve to pursue knowledge, build bridges, and fight for each other's dignity and human rights. Ameen.
Amin. And Hala, thank you for this beautiful reflection, but also thank you for your leadership, not only in the Muslim community, but in the city and county of San Francisco for all that you do. God bless you and God keep you.
Thank you.
It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce a name that many of us have seen on circulars coming from City Hall and the Department of Elections, but somebody whose importance right now cannot be overstated. We turn on the news every day and we hear questions about voter security and especially voter safety in these times of the pandemic. It is a great, great privilege and honor to welcome today John Arndts, the director of the San Francisco Department of Elections, to address the issues that I noted in the opening framing of this. John, thank you for being here. The floor is yours. We await your presentation.
All right, well, thank you, Michael. It's a great introduction. I appreciate it very much. So today I'll give an overview of the health and safety measures that the department is implementing, not just by ourselves, but with a lot of help from other agencies in the city, especially the Department of Public Health, the mayor's office, and the city administrator's office. But my presentation is not just on health and safety measures. It'll also mix in information about the election, about different ways to vote, the time frames associated with voting. And then I can take any questions after the presentation. So I'll just go ahead and start now. Make sure I get the right one. All right. Okay, can you guys see that? Okay, so one of the primary health and safety measures the department is implementing for this election, and really every elections department in California is also implementing, is vote by mail ballot for all voters. All voters will receive a ballot by default. So if someone registers to vote by October 19th, then the department will send a ballot in the mail to those voters. People can still vote if they're not registered by October 19th, but they'll have to go to an in-person voting situation, such as an outdoor voting center at Bill Graham Auditorium or at a polling place located throughout the city. The reason that everyone is being sent a ballot in the mail for this election is vote by mail voting is really the safest way someone can participate in this election. There's no need to go out and gather with other people. There's no need to travel across the city to a voting center or a polling place. People will have the ballots delivered to their residences. People can mark those ballots at their residences and then mail them back to the department. One extra feature that we've added to our envelope for this election for vote by mail voters is what's called a peel and seal strip. So in the past, we've had on the flap of the envelopes dry glue, essentially. It had to be moistened then to fasten the flap to the body of the envelope. Now we'll have a peel away strip that people can remove from the flap, and that exposes the glue that's already moistened, so people can close that flap down onto the envelope to seal it and to send back to us. And as I mentioned, we're working with the Department of Public Health on all of our health and safety protocols for this election. So all the voting that takes place at the polling places, all the voting that takes place at the outdoor voting center located in the Civic Center in front of Bill Graham Auditorium, all the work that takes place in the department, all the work that takes place in our warehouse, we've all put these plans to the Department of Public Health for its review, and then finally for its approval. So everything that takes place at the polling places and then takes place at the department follows health and safety protocols that have been reviewed and approved by the Department of Public Health. Now, even though all voters will receive a ballot in the mail for this election, we will still have in-person voting. One change change we've made to ensure in-person voting is as I mentioned before, to have the voting center that has been normally located inside City Hall moved to in front of the Bill Graham Auditorium. So it'll be an outdoor voting center. And what an outdoor voting center does is it increases the air circulation around anyone who goes to the center to cast their ballot. It allows more space than inside City Hall for social distancing. And it also removes the concerns that we have in relation to COVID of people gathering in large numbers together. So we'll have the space, we'll have the air circulation for the voting center at Bill Graham Auditorium. And we'll also still have voting at 588 polling places throughout the city. Polling places serve a precinct. A precinct is comprised of around 1,000 voters. And in San Francisco, because of the density of the population, 1,000 voters means that a precinct is really a matter of several blocks. It's not a large space. So when we locate a polling place in a precinct, they're usually no more than 6, but sometimes up to 8 blocks away from someone's residence. That means that the polling places are readily accessible. People can get to them. They don't have to, travel to City Hall. They don't have to go to another site that's distant from their home. They can stay within their neighborhood and just take a short walk or trip to the polling place. Now, a lot of counties in California have changed their in-person voting options. And some counties that have polling places have not maintained the same number of polling places for the November election as they have for the March election. And the reason for that is they were concerned about recruiting sufficient numbers of poll workers, having polling place owners provide sites to be polling places, staff issues, and several other reasons. In San Francisco, we never thought about not having all the polling places available to voters on election day in November as we did in March. And the reason for that is, one of the reasons for that is the neighborhood polling places is actually probably one of the safest ways that people can participate in the election and cast their ballot, because like I said, they don't have to travel to get to their polling place. It's near their home. And having 588 sites means that wherever people live in the city, their polling place is nearby. Now, we have not just relied on having a lot of polling places that won't attract a lot of voters. We've also, and again, this has all been plans that we've provided to the Department of Public Health and had discussions and will receive approval. But we've created customized diagrams for each polling place. So we've measured the space inside each polling place. We've looked for any unique features like columns or odd angles or whatever. And we sat down and we thought, how can we position the poll workers, the voting equipment, the voting booths, the tables, and the voters in a way that everyone, both poll workers and voters, can move through the voting process. Voters can mark their ballots and vote their ballots while maintaining social distancing and while maintaining a healthy site. Poll workers throughout the day will be responsible for cleansing the polling place on a set cycle. So even as we're providing a safe site, we'll maintain that safety throughout the day. Voters, when they visit polling places, when they visit the voting center at Bill Graham Auditorium, if they don't have a facial covering, the department will provide a facial covering to those folks. Everyone will have hand sanitizer available to them. We'll also provide gloves for people who want to use them. And this goes not just for the voters, but also for our personnel. In our personnel, it's just not on election day that they'll be using personal protection equipment. We're using personal protection equipment now here at City Hall. And we will as we go through the election cycle and even afterwards. So the reason I bring this up is that even as we're preparing for this election, we're already in City Hall at our warehouse. Any activity that we undertake in relation to this election, elections personnel are practicing health and safety protocols that have been reviewed by the Department of Public Health. And as we provide the equipment to the polling places, as we set up the elections, the voting center outside the Bill Graham Auditorium, we'll also be sanitizing the equipment. We'll be practicing safe practices as we move through the election cycle. And one thing too, in relation to voter health, is also the election worker health. But it does tie back to our being active in the elections process, potentially affecting voters. So every day when we come to City Hall, when we go to the warehouse, and every city employee actually, we have to self-certify as to our healthfulness, our health status. So in relation to COVID, so we have to indicate if we have symptoms of COVID in the last 24 hours. If we've had close contact with someone who has COVID in the last 14 days, or we've been around someone who's tested positive for COVID in the past 10 days. So everyone in the Department of Elections, all the contractors we work with, we all are self-certifying on a daily basis as we move through the election cycle, as we get to election day, and we'll do so on election day and afterwards. So again, this is something that we're doing now to ensure that the election is a healthy and safe one for all the voters. So again, as I mentioned, every voter in the city will receive a vote by mail ballot. All voters who are registered right now will start receiving their ballots the week of October 5th. We plan to drop the ballots on the post office facility at Evans Street around October 1st, October 2nd. And then those ballots will get into the mail stream, and by really on Monday, October 5th, was when people in numbers should start seeing the ballots in their mailboxes and at their residences. Then through that first week, we expect the ballots to be delivered to most voters who will participate in this election. But again, anyone who registers on or before October 19th can still receive a ballot. Just by registering to vote, automatically the department will send these voters ballots without them having to apply or request a vote by mail ballot. As I mentioned previously, even if someone's not registered on or before October 19th, they can still vote. It's not like the voting period ends for people at a certain date. But after October 19th, people have to actually appear at an in-person voting option here at the Bill Graham Auditorium or at their polling place. And also, if someone were to make a mistake on their ballot, they lose their ballot, the department can mail replacement ballots until and through October 28th. So anyone who receives a ballot, say on October 5th, and they don't pick up their ballot and they misplace it and they can't find it, they have until October 28th to contact the department and request a replacement ballot. Now, I know there's been a lot of concern recently in the media about the post office and the mail system getting ballots to voters and then back to departments of elections. But there are tools that are available to voters to ensure that their ballots are first issued and that second that they're counted. There's a new tool that's available to voters that the Secretary of State's office is providing, and it's called, and the feature is called Ballot Tracks. But the program that the Secretary of State's office is creating around Ballot Tracks is called Where's My Ballot? And then the link to the site on the Secretary of State's web page is on the slide here. So with the Where's My Ballot program, voters have to go to the Secretary of State's website. They have to input their personal information, which is then verified against the statewide registration database. And then voters have to input either a phone number or a phone number and/or an email address, which allows the Secretary of State to provide alerts to voters when their ballots are mailed from the post office at Evans Street here in San Francisco, and when the Department of Elections receives their voted ballots. People can receive both a text alert or an email alert, just depending on the option that they choose. I will say, if someone signs up for their service now, they'll see a screen that says there's no data available for that record. That's because we haven't mailed ballots yet. So if someone were to go to the Where's My Ballots webpage, enter their information, that they're not going to see any information related to their ballot because the ballots have not been mailed yet. Another tool that's offered on our website is the voter portal tool. The voter portal tool is much more robust than the Where's My Ballot, because voters can verify their registration information, their address. They can find the location of their polling place, but they can also track the status of their ballot through the election cycle. So what the voter portal ballot status feature allows is that when the department's vendor prints ballots, there's actually information that's placed on voters' records and attached to the voter portal tool. Also, when the ballot is assembled in its envelope, that's also information on the voter portal. When the ballots get mailed, when the Department of Elections receives those ballots, when we verify the signatures on the ballot, so people can track their ballots through the entire election cycle. So they know that we received the ballot and that we verified the signature on that envelope. But the voter portal tool also indicates when we've taken the ballot cards out of the envelope, and it further indicates when we actually move those cards in the scanners for tabulation. So people that have concerns about their ballots, about receiving their ballots, but then especially about getting their ballots back to the Department of Elections for counting, can use these tools. And I really recommend that people, especially our voter portal tool, use this tool. One thing the voter portal tool also indicates is that if there's any issue with our being able to process a ballot, one common issue that we'll experience a few hundred times each election is people forget to sign the exterior envelope, the return envelope that gets sent back to the Department of Elections. The voter portal will indicate if that issue occurs with someone's ballot. So if people are tracking their ballots using the voter portal, they can see if the ballot was stopped in the processing scheme and see the reason why there was an issue with the ballot. But the voter portal also provides the cure for that issue. So let's say there was a missing signature on the envelope. The voter portal will provide the form that people can complete and sign and send back to the Department of Elections via email or through the mail, so that we can then cure the situation. And one thing I want to say too about our processing ballots, if we can't process someone's ballot during the election cycle, we'll mail a notice to those voters. So every voter has a registration address in the voter registration database that we maintain, and a lot of folks have mailing addresses. So we'll send hard copy notices to voters using those addresses to inform them that their ballots are halted in the processing period. But we also, if we have email and phone numbers on record for voters, we'll call them and or email them as well. So again, the voter portal is a tool, but also the department, just for your information, takes affirmative action to inform people if we cannot process their ballot during the election cycle. Now, so getting those ballots back to the Department of Elections. I know there's been a lot of conversation in the media about the Postal Service for this election cycle, but really every election, the most common way that we receive ballots that people use to return their ballots is the United States Postal Service, and I expect the same to continue for this election. Before every election, we meet with the USPS representatives here in San Francisco. I'll meet with the postmaster. I'll meet with the manager of the plant that has the equipment that runs the ballots when they're mailed out to voters. I'll meet with the manager who runs the equipment on the ballots when they come back from the collection boxes throughout the city. We have the cell phone number for the person who brings the ballots to City Hall for us to process. We know the people that deal with the post office branches throughout the city. So we have a very close relationship with the post office. And the post office is very, 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 very responsive to any issues that voters bring to the Department of Elections. So this office actually tracks any calls or emails or information that we receive from voters regarding issues associated with ballots. So if there's an area of the city, let's say we get calls from zip code 94122, we inform the post office on a daily basis of these issues that we're receiving from voters. And the post office is always very quick to respond to those issues. Maybe a carrier didn't get the mail to a street at the same time that the mail arrived on the street on the same block but around the corner. They'll investigate, they'll talk to the carriers, they'll get back to the Department of Elections, and then we can contact voters. So again, even though there's a lot of concern around, there has been a lot of messaging, I would say, around the USPS. The USPS in San Francisco is very responsive to moving ballots to voters and from voters and back to the Department of Elections. One thing that is critical though with voting by mail is the ballot envelopes, the return envelopes must be postmarked on or before Election Day, and that's critical. And one thing with getting the ballots back to us is that people that live, let's say, in apartment buildings, or they use a mail drop service, that's not the same as dropping their ballots into one of the blue collection boxes located throughout the city. The post office has a relationship with an apartment building, with the mail drop service, but that is not the United States Postal Service's properties. They don't have the same level of service for an outside entity as they would for their own collection boxes. That's not a criticism, that's just a fact. And so when people send their ballots back, the best way to get the ballots back in the mail is to use those blue collection boxes located throughout the city. Now, if a lot of folks now are outside of San Francisco due to COVID, that they've moved back with family, or they've gone to another location. So the state has extended the time that the Department of Elections can receive ballots that are postmarked on or before Election Day and still be counted. So as long as the Department of Elections receives a vote by mail ballot that's postmarked on or before Election Day, within 17 days after Election Day, we can count those ballots. So let's say someone is living in Maine right now, and they receive their ballot from San Francisco for this election, and they vote that ballot, and they send that ballot back, let's say the day before Election Day. As long as that ballot, that envelope is postmarked on or before Election Day, there's 17 days that is available to that ballot to get back to the San Francisco Department of Elections, and we can count that ballot. Now, one thing too about the blue collection boxes located throughout the city, there are hundreds, if not a few thousand of these boxes. I don't think I didn't realize this until I used this locator that the USPS provides on its website. People can type in their zip code, and then this locator on the United States Postal Service's website will indicate all of the blue collection boxes that are within a mile, within 5 miles, whatever range, distance that people input into the tool will appear on the screen. I inputted 94102 last week, which is the zip code for City Hall, and I was just surprised. It was just like a mass of blue or just surrounding City Hall, because there were so many pickup boxes that are available within the Civic Center area. So, and what's also important with this locator is it provides the times that the U.S. Postal Service will collect the mail from those boxes. And I think that's one of the key issues for people to know, is they have to get the mail in the collection boxes before the pickup times, especially as the days near Election Day. If someone were to drop a ballot in the blue collection box on Election Day at 2 o'clock, thinking it just has to go a few miles to City Hall, that it's already too late if the pickup time was at noon. And the Postal Service is very strict on picking up the mail from these collection boxes. They might be late sometimes, which is of course to everyone's advantage in relation to voting, but they're never early. And they actually track the carriers as they go through their routes to collect the mail from these boxes, and they check to see if the carriers have scanned a barcode that's on each of these collection boxes, that the scan time is not before the collection time stated on the box. So it's very important that ballot envelopes are postmarked on or before Election Day. People can find the blue boxes around them by using the blue collection boxes around them by using this tool on the USPS website, and they can see the collection times associated with each box. Now, surprisingly, the next most common method that voters will return their ballots to the Department of Elections is by going to their precinct's polling place. We'll get about at least 25% of the return or the turnout for an election will be from people going to their polling places and dropping off their vote by mail ballots. Now, with voted vote by mail ballots, voters can go to any polling place in the city, though, so it's not just their own neighborhood polling place. So what that means, since we'll have 588 polling places in San Francisco for this election, that means that there's 588 drop-off sites located throughout the city on Election Day. Our website on Election Day will provide a tool where people can type in wherever they are in the city, and that tool will provide the nearest polling places to that location. So for instance, I live in the Outer Sunset, but I work in the Civic Center. So if on Election Day, if I forgot to mail my ballot the day before, or a week before, or whatever, and I bring it with work, and I think, oh my gosh, I want to get my ballot back to the Department of Elections, I can go to the Department of Elections website. On the front page, there'll be a tool on the website. I'll just punch in the address here, let's say it's City Hall, and then the polling places that are near City Hall will appear on this map for people to choose which site they want to drop off their ballot at. Another tool we're going to have is a wait time tool. So with COVID, there's a concern, of course, of people gathering together in numbers. So for people that are concerned about being around other people on Election Day, large numbers of people, they can actually use the second tool on our website to see what the wait times are. In other words, how many people are there? How many people have been going there? And they can actually choose which site has the lowest traffic as far as voters are concerned to take their ballot and drop it off and have it cast. Another note on polling places, how people can find the location of their polling place. So before every election, we send out what's called the voter information pamphlet. It's a big book, essentially, around 200, 250 pages. And on the back cover of that voter information pamphlet is the address for the polling place for that precinct. So every voter will have the location of their polling place printed on the back cover of their voter information pamphlet. Then, as I mentioned previously, our voter portal, which is on our website, will also provide the location of polling places to voters. Again, I just want to restate, though, that polling places are also ballot drop-off stations. And since we're all receiving ballots in the mail for this election, we can vote those ballots at home. If we choose not to drop them, the voted ballots into the blue collection boxes located throughout the city, we can deliver the vote by mail ballots essentially to the Department of Elections at any polling place located throughout the city. In addition to the polling places, we'll also have some additional drop-off locations for voters to use. We'll have a drop-off location here at City Hall. It'll be on the Polk Street sidewalk, which is a location that we've utilized for last several years for a drop-off site. So that'll be available to voters again for this election. The Warriors have provided the department to set up a drop-off site at the Chase Center. So we're very pleased that the Warriors have offered this site to us. We're very fortunate. So that also will be a drop-off location available to all voters. Then also the Bayview Linda Brooks Burton Library will be a drop-off site, as will the Excelsior Library. Oops, shit. But the hours for the drop-off stations, for the auxiliary drop-off stations, start just the weekend before Election Day, and then they go Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 4, and then the Monday before Election Day is actually 8 to 5. I have a typo there, sorry. Then Election Day is just the same as a polling place, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Now at Bill Graham, the voting center, as I mentioned, will open on October 5th. And that'll start at 8 o'clock in the morning. And every weekday through the election cycle, the voting center is open from 8 to 5. And then the 2 weekends before Election Day, the voting center opens from 10 to 4. And then and again on 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day. Now, one thing that seems obvious, but I still like to say it, is that if people have questions or need information or have an issue, is to contact the Department of Elections. There's no need to contact an outside entity to find out what about your ballot, about your registration status, or to tell us about, or to provide information on a problem. The department is really not only the best source of information, but also the best source to resolve any issues that occur during the elections process. We've already staffed a phone bank currently for this election, and that phone bank will increase in staffing numbers as we move through the election cycle. There's only one number for people to dial, and that's 554-4375. We'll have a phone tree for Chinese, Filipino, and Spanish language assistance. And then when people use the phone tree, someone will pick up the phone in those languages. Also, we monitor our email account on a daily basis. So if someone has an issue with registration, you have a question about vote by mail, or anything about elections, I can just email us at sfvote@sfgov.org. We check these emails on a daily basis, and we respond each email that we receive. As we go through the cycle, we receive a lot of emails. It may take a bit more time, but we will respond to every single email that we receive regarding the election. And also our website, sfelections.org. There's just so much information about this election, about voting by mail, about ranked choice voting, about the health and safety practices that we're implementing. There's the tools that are available to voters. There's information about outreach that people can access. All of our outreach materials are in digital form. So we invite everyone to actually download our materials and use it with their organizations, to use our outreach materials in newsletters, what have you. So, and also regarding outreach, we're still doing outreach. We can do online outreach. If someone wants to hold a Zoom meeting such as this, we can do a presentation. And we're still doing in-person outreach to voters. Now, of course, we'll follow all the health and safety protocols that are required. Our folks will wear facial coverings. They'll be using hand sanitizer. They'll set up the tables that they use at events so that everyone can maintain social distancing. So we're still engaged with the voters, and we're doing so in a safe manner. So with all that said, and I know it seems like there's a lot going on, but for the most part, even though the department's putting a lot of effort into modifying its practices and making sure that there's a lot of health and safety protocols that are being practiced and in place, for the voters themselves, they really won't see a lot of change for this election. So more people will receive a ballot in the mail than have in the past. That is a change, but we've already sent one notice to these voters. We've sent emails to these voters if we have their email address. We're going to follow up with another mailing here in the next few weeks to voters indicating that they'll be receiving a ballot in the mail. And then we'll also start issuing public service announcements. So we're getting the word out to people that have not voted by mail previously, so they know what's going to happen. But for voters who voted by mail previously, and that's about 71% of the registration base in San Francisco, the election will be the same as it's been for however long they've been voting by mail. The ballot's going to arrive in the very first week of the start of early voting, and then the ballot has to get back to us and postmarked on before Election Day, so we can count it. There's been no change. But we'll also have all the polling places we've had in the past. Now the locations will be different for a lot of sites this year because we've actually had, we did have to change a lot of locations due to COVID to find sites that had enough space to allow people to go through the voting process while social distancing. So we will send out notices to voters regarding these changes, but really the infrastructure is the same. We'll have the polling places, there'll be the neighborhood polling places, they'll be close to the people's residences. We'll have the early voting in the Civic Center. It will not be inside City Hall, but it'll be outside on the Civic Center Plaza, and the voting booths will be on Grove Street. So there's a bit of a change, but again, once people enter the process at the voting center, it'll be the same as they've experienced in City Hall. Now, all this will be using health and safety and health protocols as we go to a voting center, we go to a polling place. But that's not different for any of us right now. That's something that we're all experiencing. So when it comes to the health and safety protocols the department will be using for this election, it's really what people are experiencing when they go to the supermarket or they go to to a store or something. It's kind of how we do things now. And then just finally, I want to say that no matter people's concern about COVID-19 and this current pandemic, everyone will have an opportunity to vote safely for this election. And if anyone has any concerns about voting safely, to contact the department with the information that I provided. And that is my presentation.
John, thank you so much. This has been a comprehensive, informative presentation that has anticipated every question I had and has given a great deal of relief and allayed a lot of fears. And I did want to share with you, thank you, because the PowerPoint was incredible and the resource links important. We are going to be sending the recording link to this presentation today, along with the slide deck, to our 5,000 e-subscribers so that they have these resources. This was your presentation exceeded expectations.
Oh, thank you.
Even though I don't have questions, we have the format for this program is that we invite 3 community panelists, faith panelists, who are engaged in the theme that is being discussed for the day in their own realms, and they will discuss how the COVID-19 is impacting them and their work. And then they're going to ask a question of you. Unfortunately, one of our presenters contacted me early this morning. He had a staff emergency that required immediate attention. That is Kaushik Roy, and he will not be with us. But we begin with a friend and colleague and the lead organizer in San Francisco for Faith in Action, Matt Alexander.
Good morning. Thank you, Michael, and good morning, everybody. And I agree, I think it's going to be hard to formulate a question because John's presentation was so comprehensive. But let me start by sharing a little bit about what we're doing at Faith in Action. Again, as Michael said, my name is Matt Alexander. I'm the San Francisco lead organizer with Faith in Action Bay Area. And we are a network of more than 100 congregations and schools in San Francisco and also San Mateo County. And our work is really about developing community leaders who build power across lines of race, class, and language to change unjust systems. And we are part of PICO California, which organizes in 73 cities across California and in more than 3/4 of the state's assembly districts. So we really have we're part of a statewide network of faith, people of faith, really trying to raise our voices around common values to create positive change in public life. In San Francisco recently, we have been working around affordable housing for seniors. We recently won an increase in the budget process for rent subsidies for low-income seniors. This is something that's been led by a team of immigrant elders and clergy that we've been working with over the past year. And we're really excited that we were able to win that through this current budget process, an increase of $1 million in rent subsidies for low-income seniors who are really struggling during this time. And so as we move into election season, one of the questions that we as organizers have been asking ourselves is how can we really engage and what's the most productive way to engage with the election, especially during this time of COVID. And so what we are doing actually is a broad-based voter engagement campaign that is focused on low-income, low-frequency voters. So if we look at voter turnout in San Francisco, there's approximately, and John maybe can correct me on these numbers if I get anything wrong, but there's approximately 500,000 registered voters in San Francisco. And if we look at the March 2020 primary, for example, about 300,000 voted. So it was about a 60% turnout rate, which means that there was about 200,000 people who didn't vote. And of those, there's about 50,000 who are low income, meaning a household income of less than $80,000 a year. And of those, over half are concentrated in the southeast neighborhoods of the city. So supervisorial districts 9, 10, and 11. So you have about 25,000 registered voters who are low income, who live in the southeast neighborhoods of the city, many people of color. And we've decided to make a commitment as people of faith to reach out to those voters by phone and to really engage in deep conversations. And there's, you may have heard there's a term called deep canvassing that some groups are doing. So it's not your typical voter call where you say, hey, we want you to vote for this or that. But rather it's really calling and saying, hey, I'm your neighbor. Maybe I attend such and such a church or synagogue or mosque that's in the neighborhood. And we're just calling to see how you're doing and to talk with you about the upcoming elections. And to really engage folks in that conversation and hopefully to offer a little bit of hope, really, and to say, there's some really important issues on the ballot. We all need to make our voices heard. And so that's kind of our project that we're engaged in right now. And we would really like to invite all of you to participate. So if you, and I actually see that there's some folks on the call who already are participating and their congregations are already participating. But if there's others of you that, where you have congregants who would like to engage in this, it's really easy. It's an online phone bank process. And we do a training for everybody. And it's really a beautiful opportunity, like I said, to engage in real conversation with neighbors and to lend some hope to folks that for whatever reason, and I think there's lots of good reasons why people decide not to vote, but maybe to lend some hope and hopefully increase turnout even in this time. And I think it'll be even easier to vote because of the great work that John and his team are doing in terms of mailing everybody a ballot. So everyone, as of the first week of October, will actually have the ballot. And so it's really a question of saying, hey, why don't you want to take the time to fill it out and we can talk together about it. So that's one opportunity that we as folks in Faith in Action are inviting people into in terms of offering folks that space and opportunity to engage. And I mean, I guess maybe that would, if I had a question for John, like I said, I don't know that it's the process. I love voting in San Francisco. We really are a model for the country, and I think everything that John outlined is incredible. The fact that we have almost 600 polling places, the fact that it's just so accessible. And I can say, actually, in my other role, not in my job, I'm a first-time candidate for political office in San Francisco. And on the other end, his department is the best. I mean, they're so supportive. For someone who doesn't know the process, they're super responsive. They explain everything. I mean, it's really a model of how to have a democracy, a functioning democracy. But maybe my question for John would be about turnout, right? As we're trying to think about turnout. So we looking at at those March 2020 numbers, the overall turnout was about 60% in the city, but it really actually varied a lot. So District 8, which is the Castro, Noe Valley, Upper Market area, had a turnout of 72%. Whereas District 10, the Bayview, Viz Valley, Potrero Hill, had a turnout of only 48%. And like I said, so that's kind of our effort, is trying to engage those voters. I'm curious, John, maybe if you have other suggestions for people of faith who believe that, in a true democracy, everyone votes. What else can we do to kind of encourage, other than all the great work you're already doing in terms of making it so accessible? What else can we do to make voting really, really accessible for everyone?
Yeah, thanks. I think really what you're doing is the example of what more can be done to get people in these areas to vote, because the folks that don't participate in the process, often who are infrequent voters, or those who have not participated in the process, it really comes down to interpersonal connection with somebody to make that next step to get a ballot. Now is to vote that ballot, because if they're registered, they'll get a ballot. And then for those who have not participated or engaged, to register and vote to get the ballot. Because we actually do a lot of work with a lot of community organizations in those areas already. And we provided materials. We have a grant program right now. We had $250,000 that the city included in our fiscal year budget. And so we have 8 community groups that are already doing as much outreach as they can under these conditions, and regarding our ranked choice voting, registering to vote, the themes that we all hit on. But it's really that in-person connection that makes, I think, a difference for people who don't vote. And it's interesting too, because we had, whatever the numbers are in one area for turnout, 48%, let's say, in the southeast section, and that the citywide average was 60%. For the November election, the turnout will probably be close to between 85 and 90%. But the southeast part of town won't be static at 48. It's going to rise at the same percentage that the overall turnout. So it's like there's people that vote, but they don't always vote. So you want to somehow make a connection with them. But then there's obviously people who aren't registered to vote, and you need to get them registered, and that's a challenge too. But yeah, that's really the question, and that's what the community groups are trying to do. That's what you're doing is fantastic. And any feedback you have on these deep canvas calls that you're making, if that's something you can share with us, I'd be very interested in learning that. Especially if there's sort of like categories of feedback that you're getting. I'd be curious to receive that. And of course, any specific instances, if we can step in and help, we certainly will do so. But yeah, what you're doing is great, and and take our information and use it to your advantage. If you think that there's something else that we can provide, ask. We'd be glad to do so. And we are doing in-person outreach still. We can't do it to large numbers of people, but just this past weekend we were at Carnival. We were there, and we were doing social distancing. We had facial coverings and sanitizer and everything. So if there's anyone who wants to organize something, even if it's not like a group, but just some people in the community want to have elections show up and talk about the elections, help folks get registered, we'll do so. But so take our information, use it, but also let us know if we can go out there and help folks as well. But yeah, I really commend you for what you're doing. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you for that response, John, and thank you, Matt, for the incredible work that Faith in Action is doing. I don't get a chance publicly to acknowledge that. You are effective organizers. And I just wanted to say too, we are working directly with PICO on trying to get folks to complete the census, and their faith program is probably the best, and the state is offering it, and we are working very closely with them on that. This brings us to Jessica Trubowich, another longtime colleague and friend, who is the Public Policy and Community Building Director at the Jewish Community Relations Council. I know that they're doing some important civic engagement work and work around the election. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Michael, for inviting me to be part of this discussion today. Again, my name is Jessica Trubowich. I'm with the Jewish Community Relations Council. The JCRC represents over 40 Jewish organizations around the 7 Bay Area counties on matters of public affairs. We mobilize the Jewish community to advocate on issues of importance to our community and to other marginalized communities. And we build relationships with civic leaders, elected officials, and people in other faith and ethnic groups to promote understanding and build common cause. And JCRC champions justice, equality, and a strong democracy. We are guided by the value of B'Tselem Elohim, the proposition that all humans are created in the image of the divine and are therefore entitled to be treated with equal dignity in our work for a stronger democracy. Our efforts in preparation for the November election are focused on voter education, voter outreach, and closer to the election, we'll be providing voter volunteer opportunities. And everything that we're doing is being done virtually. So I wanted to highlight for you 3 of the voter education webinars that we've done so far related to democracy and the election. First, because all of these are available on the JCRC website. The first was veteran political analyst Brad Kane, and he talked about specifically how the pandemic will be affecting the November election. And then we had Assemblyman Mark Berman speak, and he also spoke about the impacts of the pandemic, but he also spoke about how to remove barriers to voting for people of color and historically disenfranchised communities. And also he authored the bill that allowed all California voters to vote by mail. And then most recently, we hosted Dr. Peniel Joseph. He is the founding director of the Center on Race and Democracy at UT Austin. And the discussion examined race, democracy, and leadership at this moment in history. So we'll continue to be doing these types of voter education programs up until the election. Additionally, as we did last year, JCRC is co-sponsoring the W Challenge. It is a widely covered social media campaign that encourages women to register to vote and turn out the polls. It's important because California ranks 48th in the nation for female voter turnout. This year's challenge coincides with the 100th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote. Includes JCRC staff participating in a 10-week social media campaign, which JCRC will be amplifying through our own channels. We will be sharing information about how to vote by mail, in-person voting, and election day volunteering on our websites and through our social media. And excitingly for us, this week we launched a campaign, Recovery, Opportunity, and Democracy. The campaign urges the Jewish community to vote yes on California Propositions 15, 16, and 17. And we're combining this campaign with voter registration efforts. With information about the ballot measures that we're sending out, we're including information on voter registration, registration deadlines, same-day registration, and materials for people who are concerned, domestic violence victims and others, who are concerned about how to register and not provide their address. So all of this material is included with some of our campaign materials. In addition, we'll have a whole host of online social media materials, posted advertisements. We're doing a slate card where this material will go out and remind people to vote, to register to vote. And we doing outreach to our 40 organizational members and synagogues in hopes that they'll take this on. In early October, we'll be launching a phone bank, which will encourage people to register to vote. And what we're hoping is that that the congregations and organizations that feel less comfortable with our proposition campaign will really take part in the voter registration efforts. So we'll be sharing information with them as how to be involved with not just our efforts, but with other Get Out the Vote efforts from other faith organizations and civic organizations. And so we're really looking for other partners at this point in the faith and civic organizations to bring our community into help register to people to vote and bring people out on election day. And John, I have two questions for you. You answered most of my questions, but I do have two others. And you know, we're hearing so much in the news about vote tampering and other fraud. How is San Francisco preparing for that? Is this something that you're concerned about? And the other question was just related to vote by mail. How do you make sure that people who are who don't speak English or who for English as a second language receive a ballot that is appropriate for them?
Great questions.
So on the voter fraud, it's always a concern. I mean, that's the basis. Really, for all the energy around elections in negative ways, the whole elections process is based on trust. We have to essentially trust ourselves to establish the election, trust ourselves, not just the department, but really the community, to run the election, then trust ourselves to tabulate those votes, and then also trust ourselves to report them accurately. So fraud is something, of course, that can wreck every part of that operation if one strand of it is pulled out. But at the same time, it's not something that we see. And I have had this job for almost 20 years, and there's just and we're not ignoring the potentiality of fraud or any anything that goes wrong with the election. But from like right now, the voter registration database is maintained by the Secretary of State's office. So all the counties feed their local registration information to the Secretary of State's office. So the state is compiling and comparing the data from all the counties against one another. And then there's one verified, essentially, version of voter information that a county can use. So it's not like someone can register and all the registration records in California require an ID number. So it's usually it's a license. People write their license number on the registration form, or they provided last 4 digits of their social security number. And so that's cross-reference against itself. So I can't register in San Francisco, then go over to Alameda and register as well. So that's really one basis. And what that means too with the statewide registration database, that the records are far cleaner than they were before everything was compiled in a central database. And also other agencies are bringing their information into the registration database the Secretary of State organizes, such as the statewide DPH, so death records. You know, everyone, like the dead people voting, it's always a concern. So the statewide DPH is putting information into that database. Each county's local health authorities are putting in deceased records through the departments of elections. So the records are cleaner than they've ever been before. So that's one huge step in preventing fraud, is that the records are accurate. But then also through the elections process, so especially for this election with vote by mail, everyone has to sign their envelope. And so on everyone's voter registration record, we have samples of people's signatures. One is on the registration form, or if they sent us a letter for something, we retain that signature. So as we go through elections with people in our database, we are collecting their signatures as reference points. So when someone sends us a vote by mail ballot, we can look at the signature that's on the outside of the envelope, and we do. Every envelope is scanned, the exterior envelope is scanned, an image is taken of that envelope, and then the signature is cropped from that image and then moved over to the registration database. And we sit there and manually compare each signature from the envelope to the one that's in our database. Every single signature is reviewed by a person. We don't automate that. Some counties do, but we still do the manual verification. And if we have an issue, we contact the voter, and if the voter can provide us another signature sample, provide more information, but we follow up on that. And if we see instances where we think that perhaps the signature just doesn't match what's on record, or we think that that someone's voting who probably shouldn't be voting, then we contact the DA's office, and then the DA's office will investigate. Every election will have instances like reported to us from voters, or we'll see it ourselves we're not sure about. And then we have the DA's office investigate the situation. A lot of times people will sign an envelope, for instance, that's not their own because it's their spouse's. So they think they're signing their envelope, but they sign their spouse and they send it back to us. Potentially that can cause some alarm. And also we work with federal authorities. So we work before every election. We meet with the DA's office. We meet with the FBI. We hear their concerns, what they're hearing about elections in other places. They ask us what our concerns are going into the election, and then on the data side, we belong to several organizations that are monitoring threats to elections offices, their databases, their websites, their social media sites. So there's a lot going on before election day, and not just on election day, in relation to fraud, to make sure that the elections are accurate. And then if something comes up, we do bring it forward, and we do seek prosecution for people that we think have fraudulently impacted the election.
And on the second part of the question, it was, I think, a linguistic question.
So everyone, so in San Francisco, we provide election materials in English, of course, but also Chinese, Filipino, and Spanish. And when people are registered to vote, there's a field on the registration form that allows people to indicate if they want information in those languages. And if they check that box, then we'll send them the voter guide before each election, those languages, and election notices, and whatever we issue in English, we provide to them in those languages. And also our website is quadrilingual, essentially. All the information that we have in English is also in the other supported languages. And then also before this election, we mailed out, I think it was 25,000 or so notices to people who we saw were born in countries where the spoken languages were Chinese, Filipino, or Spanish, and who did not mark that box on the registration form. And then we notified them that their information was available in those languages, and that if they wanted going forward information available in this language, to send this form back to us, and we could start that process. Then also, like I said, in our phone bank, we have a phone tree. We have people that pick up the phone in language. So if someone calls the Department of Elections, they don't have to know English to navigate our phone bank, and they can speak to people and receive assistance. We have many of our personnel are bilingual, so when they come interact with the department, we can usually provide support in many languages besides the ones that we support. Same with the voting center. We'll have people who can provide support in language. And then the polling place, and that's really one thing that we still need, are bilingual poll workers. We have, I think, enough poll workers for this election, but we always need more bilingual poll workers. And we're actually looking for Chinese poll workers for this election, Chinese bilingual poll workers for this election. Usually we have a more challenging time recruiting Spanish bilingual poll workers, but for this election, we actually have a larger pool of Spanish bilingual than we would expect. We have a lower pool of Chinese bilingual poll workers. But then also we have some precincts where we provide in-person language assistance according to state election law in Thai, Japanese, Korean, Burmese, and Vietnamese. We still need some bilingual poll workers in those languages as well. So again, it's kind of a rambling answer, but every process that we provide to voters, we're providing language assistance, and then also American Sign Language. So We have a service called Language Line. And there's like, I don't know, hundreds of languages that this service can provide real-time video and audio support. And it includes American Sign Language as well. So that answer your question? It's kind of a rambling answer. But...
I'm going to, because our time is running out.
Okay,
it's
sorry.
a very, very rich conversation. I did want to tell you, John, that we are good ambassadors to these vulnerable populations in the faith community, and we very much would love to collaborate with your department in terms of helping to provide those resources as needed. I want to say a very special thank you to you, John, for the time you took to prepare and the important presentation you gave, very timely, and for the work that you're doing, especially this year in these unprecedented times. I want to thank Matt and Jessica for the important work they're doing and for taking time out of their day to present here and to ask these important questions, as well as to dear Rita and Hala for kicking us off today. And as we're saying thank yous, I want to say a very special thank you to Cynthia Zambucas, our administrative program associate at the San Francisco Interfaith Council. I say my right and my left hand. We are a staff of 2. And I also want to say a very special thank you to the COVID Command Center's Joint Information Center virtual outreach team, and in particular to our coordinator, John McKnight, and our leads, producer Lynn Mays and Sharon Walton, without whom we couldn't be providing these important briefings. We would invite you to join us next week as we welcome San Francisco Unified School District's Superintendent, Dr. Vincent Matthews, who will shine a light on the impact COVID-19 has had on education in San Francisco. It should be a very interesting and important topic. So please join us. Again, thank you to all of you. And this concludes our program for the day.
All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.